So Scott, it's my pleasure to have you share.
Hi everybody, my name is Scott and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is 6/17/1987, and for that I'm very, very grateful. And the purpose of this book is to get a higher power, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about the higher power tonight. And I'm so glad that you're here, Elaine, because that's the first thing we're going to talk about is that, because you know, if you didn't do the math, it's 38 years sober, and you know, you probably look up here and think like, wow, but you know what? I'm probably as nervous as you would be if you were up here with 10 days. You know what I mean? And but something that calms me down. And Elaine came to the hospital and prayed with me. I called her, and so I've had a lot of God things through my life, you know, and but none of them got me to cease fighting everything and everyone. They really didn't, you know. I would still like had a little fight in me, or a lot of fight in me, you know what I mean? And I would know to pause, but I would not pause. But so on on August 4th of 2021, I was really sick, and I had COVID, and I was not responding. I had been sick for like a week, and I wasn't responding to my family members, and my niece is a nurse for Mayo Clinic, and she was trying to get a hold of me, and a friend at work said, go check on him. The last thing I remember is they knocked on my door, and they said, and I said, you know, and so anyhow, to make this story a little shorter here so we don't run out of time, I'm just kidding, but my niece couldn't get the police here. She said, they're tough in Vegas, you know, and so she knew one thing that would get him to come, and so she said, he's having chest pains and shortness of breath. She lied, and she never lies. And she got the police there, and my friend happened to be there at the same time, Jeff from work, and they came in, and they asked me, and I don't remember any of this, they said, how old are you? And I said, I'm 33 years old. And they said, I mean, I'm a little older than that, and they said, where are you? And I said, I'm in Caledonia, Minnesota. And they said, oh, okay. And my friend said, call an ambulance. So they got the ambulance there, and I was at 50% oxygen, and they immediately took me to Sunrise Hospital. And right when I got there, I was failing, and they put me on life support. And they said, we're going to induce him, you know, and we're going to wake him up in 4 days or 3 days or something like that. And my niece knew that that's the procedure that they do, you know. And I read all this on Caring Bridge. I can't believe I can remember everything here. It's nice. Caring Bridge, like a few days late, or like a few months after I came out of the coma. But anyhow, I did not wake up at 4 days, and I did not wake up at. She was saying, well, he's definitely going to wake up on the 7th day. You know, they're going to wake him up tomorrow, and I did not wake up. And then we're at about like day 18, and they're telling my niece that it's not good. You're a nurse with Mayo Clinic, and they sent her a picture of my lungs, and they were all white. And I went to a pulmonologist in Wisconsin, and he said, what are you doing here? It was like a joke, because it was like aftercare after I came out of the coma, and he said, I've been a pulmonologist for like 15 years, and I read x-rays before that at school, and he said, it's medically impossible to go from those lungs to these lungs. The only explanation is God. And so I did not wake up on 18 or 19, and they were telling my niece that you have to prepare. He's probably not going to wake up. And they actually had a funeral for me at work, and they had little flowers. this Jewish guy had a funeral for me. Yeah, he did. Oh, I just worked with him the other day. And so I was 33 years old when they asked me, and when I woke up on the 33rd day, you know, and when I woke up, I thought, oh, I don't know what happened, but I know one thing: I'm very lucky to be alive. And the first thing I thought of, I had all these coma dreams. I mean, I had dreams where this lady in AA would pick me up in a Rolls-Royce helicopter. We'd fly all over the place. And I knew I was on a life support, and I knew I couldn't talk, and I was paralyzed in all my dreams, you know. But my favorite dream was, because they gave me last rites, they hit me with a narco pin, and my favorite dream was, there was a lady praying, and she had her hands like this, and they came up over the top of her head, and she just prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed, and it was the most peaceful place I'd ever been in my life. And I remember looking at her shirt, saying it's so beautiful. There's blues that I've never even seen before. And when I woke up, the first thing I thought is, wow, I don't know what happened, but I immediately said, but where that lady was praying was a wonderful, wonderful place. And you know what? I knew that that's where we're all going, you know? And I just love Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're new, you're very lucky to have found this place, you know? I came in in 1987, and I'll tell you how I got here. Well, I will tell the train story first. Dave loves the train story. You know, I could tell you all these stories. I mean, but really, everybody's got all them battle stories, you know. And I did not care about one other person when I was out there using. The only thing I cared about is getting more alcohol and more other stuff that we don't talk about. And I was living with this girl, and well, I had taken her hostage, and her two kids, and I said, can I borrow the car? And she goes, well, I have to take the kids to school at 8 o'clock. Will you be back by then? And I said, oh yeah, I'll be back by then. I mean, I'm in Ventura, and I'm only going to San Francisco, so I should be back in a couple hours. So I go to San Francisco in her car, because I'm going up there to People's Park, because I like the type of stuff they have at People's Park. I got off the other stuff. It's really true. It's how nuts I was, you know. And I'm up in People's Park. And well, I didn't get to People's Park yet. I had to go to jail first. I robbed somebody, and the police chased us, and luckily we got rid of everything, and we ended up getting her car impounded. I went to jail. Then I got out and I went to People's Park. And then it was LSD, okay? So, and it didn't give me a lot of oomph like the other stuff did. And I couldn't really do anything. I was like a flower child there or something, you know? And I said, I got to get back to Ventura. I mean, you know, in Ventura, they had go fast stuff in Ventura, and I needed to get back there. So there was his name was Captain at the park, at People's Park in Berkeley, California. And I went up to him and I said, hey, I need to get back to Ventura, and I got no money or anything. And he goes, oh, well, here's what people have been doing to get money. They go down to the college and they panhandle. And I said, really? I said, oh, okay, I'll do that. You know, but I got no patience at all. So I probably spent about 15 minutes panhandling down there and didn't get any money. And I came back and I said, that did not work. Do you have any other ideas? And he said, well, you could ride the train. I said, ride the train? He goes, yeah. You tell them you're diabetic, you get on the city bus, this bus, you go down, you get off here, and you go down and you ask where Joe is. He's the guy who changes the tracks. And he'll tell you which train to get on to go to Ventura. I said, wow, are you kidding? This is great, you know? And so I go there, and I I find Joe. It was unbelievable. He said, get right on that train right over there, and there's nobody in the caboose. He said, you can relax back there. They probably got some food, maybe even a beer in the fridge. I thought, are you kidding me? Like, this is fantastic, you know? And they even had a bed back there. And I hadn't had a bed, like, I've been sleeping in the park, you know? And before that, whatever, you know? And so I laid down and I took a nap. And when I woke up, I looked outside the train and there was only one set of tracks. And I knew that that did not look right. Because he had told me, when the train stops, you got to get off and go ask Bill because you need another train to Ventura. It's like I had a changeover, you know, whatever you'd call it. and I missed the changeover. I slept through it. So now I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And so I get off the train and I said, where's the train to Ventura? And they said, there won't be a train through here for a week. I said, what? And I got no money, no special effects. I'm like a porcupine turned inside out. You know, I'm like, it's bad. And there's a little town there, and I know if I go down there and try to steal stuff, I'm going to be in jail. Like, so I stole some food from the people at the train station. I got some kid to bring me peanut butter sandwiches, and I got some cigarettes out of him. And about 3 days or 4 days, a train came, and I jumped on it. I take anything to get out of there, you know, and it went up about like 10 miles, and then it backed all the way back, right back up where I started from. And they said, no, that train don't go nowhere. The Ventura train will be here in 3 more days or whatever. I'm like, this is like crazy, you know? And so sure enough, here come the Ventura train, and I was ready for it. And I got on the train, and I got back to Ventura, you know? And I mean, I did a lot of stuff, but if that doesn't tell you how crazy of an alcoholic I was. I grew up in a little town in Minnesota, and I grew up in a good family. My dad was a Marine Corps paratrooper. He got off Iwo Jima twice alive. He ran the flamethrower, burning the Japanese out of the caves, so he was a little crazy. And it was like we had foot lockers at the bottom of our bed. He tried to be very strict, but we were wild animals. You know, he could not control us. He really could not. He tried. And and it was just one thing after another. And, you know, I had a lot of fun as a kid. I remember one time I was out driving the truck. I was like 14 years old. And I was driving through the cemetery, and I had my window down. And here come the police, and I'm about ready to faint, you know. I'm 14 years old, driving the truck. I'm not supposed to be, you know, off the farm. And the cop goes, hi, Mark. He thought I was my older brother. I said, well, that's great. Like, I can drive in town. So I just started driving everywhere at 14, you know. And you know, I did nothing but bad stuff, you know. I had a lot of fun, and then I had fun and trouble. I went to about 50% fun and 50% trouble, but I was still having fun. Then I went to, and this went quick, then I went to, like, let's just say about 70% trouble and 30% fun, but by God, I was still having fun. And then I got in a bunch of trouble, and they gave me a choice. I could either go to prison or I could go in the Navy. And I said, I'll take the Navy. I don't want to go to no prison, you know. And then I broke my femur the night before I was supposed to go in there. So I did not have to go into the Navy, but I did end up with a broken femur because we were on a big drunk. And you know, it just went on and on and on. And so I believe, you know, like God came into my life in that coma, and I ceased fighting everything and everyone after that, you know. I even like tell people like, yeah, you know, sometimes I know I'm right. I know I should tell the person how I feel and what I think, and they deserve it, but I just tell them I'm sorry and walk away. And I ain't gonna lie, I still feel like a little bee. But I just say it. But you know what? I feel a lot better 5 minutes later than I would have if I'd have went off on them, you know? And I've been pretty good at that, you know? So here's the end of my using. This is the last week of my using. I ended up in San Diego. I got in a lot of trouble in Ventura, and I ended up in San Diego, and I would walk every day from Mission Beach to Pacific Beach for breakfast. I would steal it at the 7-Eleven. And on the way there, I would always think all I ever did was hurt my mom, my family, and everybody. You know, that's really what the most thing that I ever did, you know, was just hurt everybody, you know. And I would think I'll get something out of each food group that would make my mom happy, you know, because my mom was praying for me all the time. And I believe that's why all this stuff started to happen, because I didn't even have, I believed in God. I always had, but I never thought about asking God for help, you know. And I'm just out there just completely strung out. I'm with complete criminals. I have no friends left. I called my dad 6 months before that, and I told him I needed $27 for roofing tools or something, sheetrock I think it was. And he said, I'm not helping you anymore. And he had never said that before. And I slammed down the phone, and then I never called him again. And I think it's thank God he put a missing persons out on me, because one time the police said, you got a missing persons out on you. And I think it helped. I think well, anyhow. So I'm coming back from breakfast. and I'm walking along the beach, and all of a sudden I hear this voice, and it says what are you doing? And I'm thinking, yeah, what am I doing? I can still remember I looked up to the left, who said that, you know? And then I thought, and what are you doing? You know, you have sobered me up now, and I'm realizing just how screwed up my whole life is and everything, and this is uncomfortable. And I envisioned myself in a sunken living room with a kid, and I ended up in that sunken living room with a kid. And I always think of this, really, another thing that really got me there was maybe that a couple days later, you know, we were helping the tourists feel better. We were selling them stuff. You know, I was a salesman, and that's been my career my whole life. And so the police were after me, and I taunted the police. I really did, and that's a dumb thing to do. If you ever go back out, don't taunt the police, because they don't like it. And you'll never catch me, and they couldn't. And I'll never forget it. I'm sitting in Mission Beach, and I could see the roller coaster in Mission Beach, and I'm in a Mexican restaurant on the porch, and I see Stevens, that's this cop that's always messing with us, and this other cop that's always messing with us, and in between them is a cowboy, a tall guy with a cowboy hat on, and you know, I think God sent a cowboy, and I see him walking up, and I'm thinking who is this guy? Who is he? You know, and him and them guys came right onto the porch of the Mexican restaurant I was, and the cowboy walked right up to me, and he said, "Hi, Scott, I'm so-and-so, and I'd just like to introduce myself." And I thought, wow, that is not good. This gig is over. That's just what I thought. I said, I remember thinking the next time he comes and says, "Do you remember me?" I'm going to be behind bars. I even could see the bars. And it was about 2 or 3 days later, we were heading to Ventura for a Grateful Dead show. And I knew all the Grateful Dead, because that's why I went to People's Park. I knew them all. I was one of their best salesmen, you know. And so I would go to the shows, and I would work. I would work the shows, you know. And so I get to Ventura, and I meet them, the Deadheads, and they go, "We're in the Holiday Inn. Come and stay with us, Scott. Man, we really missed you." And they thought I was still this flower child, you know, deadhead, and they didn't know I was a meth monster now, you know, and a robber. And so they invite me into the room, and of course I'm not going to go to sleep. I'm like whacked out, you know, and so I wait for them to go to sleep, and you know, I tried to like, I never really had hardly any good thefts ever. I had some of the stupidest thefts there ever was. One time I robbed a Domino's pizza. Yeah, and all I got was change. They go, that's all we have. Like, it was like $2. But I did get 6 delivery drivers chasing me, one with a knife trying to stab me. Yeah, and so anyhow, I'm in this room in the Holiday Inn, and they all go to sleep, and I find this thing of LSD, like a stack of sheets. It's like 10,000 sheets. And I opened it up, and I said, wow, this is a score. And I said, if I steal this, I will be dead. And I zipped it back up, and I put it back where I found it. And I still remember when I left that room, because I just left after that, and the door closed, I thought, what a complete idiot. That's what I thought. Like, what? I mean, that's the first score you ever had, and I went to the show, and and then they found me, and I was working for them, and then like 2 days later, the show was over or whatever, and I have one of them things left, you know, because I did other stuff that took all the money quickly, and I gave it to this guy, and now I have never ever done that before, ever. But I knew this guy, like I could get something out of him if I ever seen him again. You know what I mean? Don't you remember what I gave you, you know? And I could have sweated him for it, you know? And then we got in a car to go back to a stolen car, of course, with the only 2 people that weren't welcome, didn't have any friends, and even the criminals were after us in San Diego. And we were heading back to San Diego. And I don't even like to tell this. I could not tell this. I could not tell this when I was new. I just was embarrassed, you know, and it is embarrassing. And, you know, we robbed about 3, you know, we would rob like cigarettes and beer and food. And I mean, I'd steal any damn thing. I didn't care. I was terrible. And and I said, we were up in LA area. And I said, go to Beverly Hills. I hear they got money in Beverly Hills. I'd watch the Beverly Hills Billies. I bet you that's where I got that idea. And so we went there, and I said, find a bank. So we went to a bank, and I seen this lady coming out of the bank with a nice purse. So I jumped out of the car, I grabbed the purse, and I took off running. And they were driving that way, and I was going to jump in the car, and there was like 7 people there. And I thought, do they really think they can stop me? Like, I'm a tough guy. I didn't take into account that I was a shot-out little junkie now, you know. And they grabbed me, and they threw me to the ground, and they broke my shoulder. And then they go, well, and I got sick, because you get sick when you break a bone. And they said, let's let him sit up. And I go, yeah, please let me sit up. And I tried to get away, and I did not get away. And I ended up in LA County Jail. And when I got into LA County Jail, there was a good force and a bad force. And the good force said, do you want to go with him, or do you want to go with me? And I said, I want to go with you. And I've been sober ever since that. And they even, you know, in LA County Jail, I thought, my God, if this is a jail, I do not want to go to prison. This is like the LA County, but I heard that's worse than any prison almost. I mean, it was crazy. And thank God I was crazy, you know what I mean? Guy took my commissary, I bit him and drew blood, and they gave me it back. The other people said, give him his shit back. Right, Chris? And I mean, you know, I was just a scared guy, you know, because when I have a physical allergy. When I put anything in my body, I have no idea what's going to happen. That didn't happen like the first time. I used to quit every Sunday, And I could have took a lie detector test that would have said I was never going to drink again. But every Thursday I would drink again because I have an allergy. When I put something in my body, it is over. I'm going to drink. I'm going to drink again, And I get the mental obsession, I think I can control and enjoy it, but I can't do both. It's impossible. So anyhow, I'm in LA County Jail now, and I've made a whole term. They're offering me drugs because this Marine came and put money on my books, and I said, no, I'm done. And I told my cellmate that I was just going to plead guilty because I had done so much in society. I should be in prison forever. So I'm just going to plead guilty. And he said, do not take what they offer you the first time. And I had never even thought of pleading guilty ever before this. I'd been in jail many times, and I figure if they got me, they got me. But I'm not telling them nothing. I'm not even going to talk to them when they ask me what I want to plead to. And he said, don't take the first thing, So I said, they came and offered me 17 months in prison, and I said, absolutely not. And no way, you can do better than that. I didn't say that, but and then they left, and I got a little of that psychosis, and then all of a sudden they called my name again. Now I'm like, oh, what is going on now? They never called my name twice before, And they took me, and the lady was from out of state, and she wasn't going to testify. So they told me we're dropping the charges. We can bring them back up within a year. And I spent 17 days in LA County, and I got out. And my dad was helping me, and the Marine guy was picking me up at the airport, or picking me up at a restaurant near the jail. And I still remember I got out and I go, oh, I don't have a shirt, because they ripped my shirt off me. Those people did, those do-gooders. I'm just kidding. And when I was walking out, this is how my whole life went since I decided to that I had had enough. And there was a shirt right on the rail on the way out. I thought, this is fantastic. It wasn't the cleanest shirt I ever seen, but it was a shirt. It'd get me into the restaurant, And so I put on the shirt. And of course, that guy didn't want to meet me at the restaurant any early. I don't blame him. Would you want to, And so I waited around. When I walked out on the steps of LA County Jail, and I was standing there getting ready to go down, and there was a guy down below in a limousine, standing outside a limousine, and he said, do you want to go get high? And I thought, what? I never had anyone ask me, I didn't think this, but I would have stole his limousine like a week ago, And I thought, well, my life is over, I'm going to AA, because my sister was setting up AA, and I knew all this stuff. I was going to treatment, and I had no idea what all this stuff was. She was in AA, and I didn't know what the heck was going on. And I remember that was my first thought, but my second thought was no, and I just screamed at the guy, and he's like, well, just settle down, And so I said, it's not safe out here. I got to get to that restaurant. So I think I had a little money from my books or whatever. So I got there and had coffee and waited for that guy in the restaurant, And then he took me to the airport. And in the airplane, it was working on me, that, my life is over. Never going to have all this fun again. I'm not going to be woke up by the sprinklers. I'm not going to be stabbed. I'm not going to be shot at. I even shot myself accidentally one time. I'm not going to go to jail anymore, I might even end up with a friend, somebody that actually wants to talk to me, But, do I really want to give all that up? That's a lot to give up, And I go, maybe one last hurrah, because I'm going to be down by where I grew up, So my sister picked me up at the airport, and I ran it by her. And I said, do you think I could go down to Caledonia for the weekend? My hometown, I didn't think I could get off on a 2-year run down there, on just a little alcohol. And she said, we went to an awful lot of trouble to get you in to this treatment center. And I thought, well, I can't put her out. And I said, okay. And away we went to the treatment center. And we parked, and I got right out and lit a cigarette because I smoked, and I needed a cigarette, that long car drive from the airport. And I'm smoking away, and she goes, we're walking up there, and she goes, well, you better put that out. And I said, you mean to tell me you can't even smoke in there? And she said, I don't think so. And I thought, wow, I have definitely overcorrected here. That's what I really thought. I thought, I really think like I went too far. And there was like one of those round ashtrays there, and I can still remember putting out that cigarette thinking, I can't believe I'm giving all that fun up, like. And I honestly was looking around thinking like, maybe there's an Al Capone's training camp around here or something, like, I could get some training and go back out, But what happened is I walked into the treatment center, and I immediately knew I was home. I honestly did. I could just hear the conversations. They were just people like me, and I could just hear the conversations, and and they were drinking coffee, and they were smoking. They were still letting them smoke then at St. Mary's Treatment Center in Minneapolis. And I lit up a cigarette, I got some coffee, and I made some really strong coffee, and some guy bitched about that, and I said, you better be careful, we're on the second floor and there's a window there. I didn't say it, but that's what I thought. But I didn't act on any of that stuff, and it was the start of everything, and I was in the treatment center, and people were complaining that they didn't have a private room. I didn't even know where my room was. I had to ask them. There's only 3 halls, and every time I would go to the front desk and I would say, which hall am I down? They already knew I was going to ask it. They'd just say that one right there. Thank you. And I'd walk down and I'd find my room, and I shared a room and I didn't care. And then they were complaining about the food. Now I had been sleeping about every 6 days, and I had not been eating. And I thought the food was the best food I ever had in my entire life. And I just loved it, and they came for family week, and I can remember one thing. My mom said that the thing that hurt, all the things that hurt her the most, but like she was with her friends, and they were coming to the football game because I didn't want to work at home anymore. So I said, I'm going out for football, but I never went out for football. So she's telling her friends, yeah, we're going to, their kids were in the football game. So she said, my kid's in the football game. Well, her kid was not in the football game. I said, there's no Scott there. And I had not joined for football. I just told them I was. And so I didn't, and that really hurt my mom. And that's what I did, is just hurt, And that's what we do as alcoholics, And honestly, I believe it's not our fault, because the minute everything turned there and I ended up here, it's all been completely a whole different story, I've raised a wonderful family. I have so many friends in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I no longer have to fill that spiritual hole with drugs and alcohol. I can fill it with God. And if you're new and you don't really feel like you have a connection with God, welcome home, because I did not feel like I had a connection with God when I got here either. There's only 2 things I've done consistent in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that is not drink and not turn my will and my life over to the care of God. They'd be the 2 things that I've definitely done consistently, And but slowly but surely, the more I do AA and the more I do the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and come to the meetings and listen to the stuff, the more I got rid of the selfish Scott, and the more room there was for God to come into my life, And, this thing is unbelievable, There's a friend of ours, Michelle. Dave sat way back there because I threw him under the bus like 10 times the other night when I spoke. Say hi, Dave. So our friend Michelle, she she gave her babies away. She was a crackhead. Her mom bailed her out of everything, and she called her mom and said, I think I'm going to kill myself. And her mom was done with it. She said, do what you got to do. I'll have to tell Michelle to listen to this now. She was telling them at the Misfits that my life is over. And they go, that's right. That miserable existence that you've been living, giving away your babies, hurting everybody is over. And it's time to get a life worth living in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know? And if you got what I got, this is the only place you can get rid of it. This is it right here, Alcoholics Anonymous, you know? And I was 5 years sober, and I was sitting in the meetings, and I did not like one person in there. There used to be this girl, black girl, Kim, used to come. I knew he would remember Kim. And Dave remembers Kim. She's cute as heck. And she's a preacher now. I wish I could find her. She's a preacher in Vegas. And she would say, I hate all you MRFers. And she didn't say MRFers. She said it all. And we were friends, me, her, and Matt Trebone. We were like the three amigos. And I would say, Kim, I wish I had the balls to say that, because that's exactly how I feel, you know? And then I was sitting in a meeting one day, and I said, you know what? I can't take it anymore. That lady just shared about her dog again, and that other idiot that just, oh my God, I think this AA is making me worse. I really did. And I said, I can't take it. I said, I'm not going to any more meetings. I'm leaving. And I started to stand up to leave at the Triangle Club, and I said, well, out of respect, you should stay for your last meeting. I suppose it was a voice that told me that or something, you know, so I sat back down. All right, I'll stay. It's only 15 minutes left, you know. I can probably like suffer through it, you know. I mean, if one more idiot shares, oh my God, it's just ridiculous, you know. And I waited for the meeting to end, and I got up, and I was on the board at the Triangle Club because Don was my sponsor. And he was not at the meeting, and I walked over to the Triangle Club, and I walked into the Triangle Club, and he said, how you doing, kid? He was like a hound dog. He could just sense it. Like, so many people will tell you that. He was like a hound dog. Like, he knew when you were new. He knew when you were in trouble. And he said, get a pen and paper and come over here and sit down. I said, okay. And I definitely wasn't about to tell him I wasn't going to AA anymore. I figured he'd find out soon enough, and I'd try to explain to him why, you know. And he said, draw a big circle and a little circle. He said, the big circle's the world and the little circle's AA. Where do you live, kid? And I didn't know the answer, and at that time I did not answer questions I did not know the answer to. And he said, well, people like me and you, he used to tell people that I crawled out of a dumpster in Los Angeles, and I never slept in a dumpster. I want that on the record. I'm just kidding. But he said, guys like me and you, we're garbage can alcoholics. There's some people that can go to a few meetings, they can take their kids to soccer, and they seem to be all right. Now, I haven't seen that since in all these years. If you got this, you got it, you know? But he said, the big circle's the world and the little circle's AA. And you, guys like me and you, have forfeited our right to live in the world. We must live in Alcoholics Anonymous, visit the world, and come back to Alcoholics Anonymous, or we're doomed. And to be doomed means we're going to die. He goes, do you know what the penalty for treason is? And I did know that. And he goes, that's what happens if you go out. The penalty is death, you know? And he said some more stuff, and I was just like in shock. I'm not kidding. I just was in complete shock. I don't know how he did. And I got up, and I was walking away, and I still remember I tripped on the carpet. They had carpet in the Triangle yet then, and I turned around and I looked at him, and I don't even know if he looked at me. He probably was smoking his cigarette. And I said, well, I got to keep going to those meetings. And you know what? I've never looked back, and that would have been 33 years ago. And I never, ever once questioned it. I knew for a fact that I had to live in AA, visit the world, and come back to AA, or I was going to be dead. And if you have any problems in your life, there's one answer that works every time. Go deeper into AA. Go deeper into AA, more meetings, more commitments, Just stand in front of a meeting and greet. When you walk into a meeting, go around and introduce yourself to everybody, And, like the steps, they're really not as difficult as people make them out to be, Like the first 3 steps is like, I can't, he can, I think I'll let him. You know what I mean? Like, it's like really almost that simple. Like you ought to Google Chuck Chamberlain going through the steps. That's about what he says. On step 3, you just give the keys to the wife. You're not in the driver's seat anymore, You gotta just let God drive, And everybody's so terrified of the 4th and the 5th step. Really, it's not really about all the terrible things you did in a way. It's about your resentments, you know what I mean? You can make a thing of all the stuff that you're ashamed of and share that. But really, you write down, I'm resentful at so-and-so. The cause is he went after my wife, and it affects my sex relations, my whatever, whatever it affects. And then I was taught to, you write them down, and then you pray for 2 weeks for the people that you write down 7 of them. This is just the way I was taught. And then after, you're pissed off at those people, then you get to say, where was I selfish? Where was I dishonest? I was selfish because, and write it out. I was selfish because, write it out. I was dishonest because, write it out. I was dishonest because, write it out. I was self-seeking. They do give you one break. I was frightened because, I think they just threw that in there to make you feel good, like, yeah, I was frightened at what they did, you know what I mean, I just love Alcoholics Anonymous, Don told me if you're not eating, sleeping, or working, you should be in AA. I mean, what else are you going to do? Go home and sit there and think? That's always a lot of fun, And it says, it says after you do the 4th and the 5th, you go home for an hour. It doesn't say approximately an hour. I mean, when I did it, I had to write out all this exactly, those little 2 dots after I'm resentful at, 2 dots. It had to be exactly, it was like real precise. And I like that, I was raised by that Marine Corps paratrooper, and I went home and I set an alarm for an hour, and I just sat there. I took the book down and I took the book down and I reviewed the steps and have I let the principles, the steps, they're not that scary. Like people make them scary, This step gave me so much freedom, I figured out like I was the problem. Like none of these other people had anything to do with it. It was me, and I honestly kind of knew that because like I was just like a tornado roaring through people's life, And, I sat there for exactly an hour, I did everything precisely. Oh, here's my fun stuff. So I got the top 10 here, guys. Yeah. So there's 55 musts in the book. Now, when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I came into 2218 First Avenue South, and I had never been to AA before, and I went in there, and they had squads. And this place had been around about 45 years already in Minnesota then. And there was people there with like 40 years of sobriety. I thought like, how did they hear about this? Like I had never even heard of anything about AA, And they had squads and I remember they were like passing the basket around and I thought, oh, well, I'm drinking 2 cups of coffee. I'll put $1 in, but I'm drinking 2 cups of coffee. Then they started calling on people. And I said, oh my God, they're going to call on me. And I was just terrified. And And then they said, take the cotton out of your ears and stick it in your mouth. And I said, oh, that's the best news I heard. They are not going to call on me. And then they said, be downstairs before the big meeting on Saturday night or Friday night. They said, we got class. And it did not sound optional to me, and I was used to taking orders. I did it well when I was a kid. I didn't do so well when I turned about 12. I no longer took any orders from my dad. And I used to run away all the time. They even took me to the mental hospital to try to scare me, and that didn't work. And I was down there, and they had on the board resentment. And they talked about how resentment is the #1 offender, you know. It kills more alcoholics than anything. And they said, treat that like you would treat thinking about drinking. And you know, they used to tell us if you're thinking about drinking, instead of going and getting alcohol, just go under the sink. Because back then they had skull and crossbones on the chemicals. And just drink some of that stuff. They said it'll be quicker. And do the same thing with resentment, because it's like taking poison waiting for the other person to die. You might as well just kill yourself, you know. And they weren't that nice back there, you know. And they were very serious about it, you know, and I'm glad I got that, you know. And then I remember one of the things that really helped me a lot is they said, nobody comes into AA looking for a brochure. And I said, well, I lived on the streets for about 2 solid years before I got here. I was sleeping in the parks once a week. I had been stabbed. I had been put in jail a few times. I mean, I definitely did not just come here for no brochure, I'm thinking, you know. And I'm sitting in this clubhouse. It was a big Victorian house. And I'm sitting there, and this guy comes walking in, and he walks over to me, and he goes, hey, I'm just looking for a brochure. I said, sit down, hold on. And I ran and found like an old timer, you know. And I said, there's a guy out there looking for a brochure. I thought, this is serious shit here, you know? Excuse me. And they came and they talked to him, and I seen that kid take a year. I was there when I can still visualize it when he took a year. And you know what? I've never heard anybody say anything about brochures since then. Pamphlets and stuff like that, but not one thing about a brochure since then. And this kid, you know, is still sober today. And there's 55 musts in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I Googled it, that's how I found out. But when I came in, I was willing to go to any lengths to stay sober, I really was. If they would have told me to go down and stand in front of the Mirage and chuck like a chicken on one leg at 5 o'clock every day, Scott would have been down. I would have thought, like, I trusted them, every word they said. You know, they even said that you can trust anything these men say. It says it in the big book. And I would have done it. If they said it'll increase your chances, I'd have been down there like, you know, I really would have. And so the top 10 musts: must not expect, must be present to others. These are only 10 out of the 55. You got to look up the rest of them. Must lose fear, must help others, must find spiritual basis of life, must change everything. It doesn't say that, but it really is. Must be willing, must get rid of selfishness, must be accompanied by action. And the top one, the #1, guess what? Must stop drinking. Can you believe? I mean, really, if you do that, you know, if your ass is falling off, pick it up and take it to a meeting, you know? And, you know, because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have a host of friends. I raised 4 wonderful kids and I got a great relationship with them. I have a great relationship with my nieces, my nephews, my friends. Tommy roped me into coming up here before, and so he drives me up here. I don't even think I could find this place. It's so far up here. I tell people we're right up by the Mormon temple. I love it, you know. And I love Keith. Keith, thank you so much for asking me to share. And if you're new, I hope you got something. I hope you got something out of this, you know. just know that anything you put in front of Alcoholics Anonymous is the first thing you'll lose. And it really is true. And I still want this thing as much as I would want a breath of air if you were holding my head underwater. And there is no better way than Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. And thank you.